Some of the people that I've worked with, when they get a diagnosis and they're going through chemotherapy, there's a very big difference where their mindset is at. To be able to view tragedy as a warrior versus a victim and use it to actually strengthen our will to heal.
That piece is so powerful.
What is your intention to serve? It goes back to the cells in the body. If we are coming to the world every day with me, then you are coming to your day and to your world starving. And so when you're actually physically healing, the cells in your body get that signal of desperation and say, oh, hey guys, we don't have enough of anything. So I guess we're going to just keep getting depleted. Versus if you come to your day and to the world with, I'm going to do something to help somebody today. The cells in your body say, oh, wow, we've got a lot, because we're actually thinking about what we can do to help other people.
In this episode, Lea Llovio, the path to peak performance through positive thinking and the power that comes from that. This is an episode I just absolutely loved, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. Thanks to Lea. All proceeds from the views of this show go to the American Cancer Society. Welcome to the show. The podcast is the pathway to peak performance.
Yes.
And one of the things that we've done recently is make the show geared towards the charity of the guest. So you get to pick the charity that you would like all the profit from the views to go to.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So the idea is that, like, hey, we can tell a great story about the pathway to peak performance for you personally and the things that you do with other people to help them achieve that. And then also we can take the views and apply it to something that's going to be constructive and positive for the world.
I love that. That's beautiful.
So you don't have to tell us what your charity is now unless you know exactly what it is.
Oh, I know for sure. Yeah.
You do? What is it?
The American Cancer Society.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've had just so many family members and clients have cancer, and I think we still need a lot of research there. We still need a lot of help there. And that's why I really work on the thought processes with people, because, like, for example, some of the people that I've worked with, when they get a diagnosis and they're going through chemotherapy, there's a very big difference where their mindset is at, how the entire process goes, the speed at which they heal, the actual even side effects, and getting like the whole family on board to really decide from the beginning, this is going to work. We're going to get through this. And of course, it is a tragedy, but to be able to view tragedy as a warrior versus a victim and use it to actually strengthen our will to heal and our belief in the science, right?
So fascinating. I mean, that piece is so powerful if you think about it. It really is a decision. Let's go deeper into that. That's huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like, for example, there are some teachers that would talk about which thoughts equate to certain physical ailments. And one of the ones that people say has to do with cancer is like repressed anger, for example. And this is why we really start to incorporate the ability to release anger. And that doesn't mean that we say, oh, if something was done to you that you have every right to be angry about, that doesn't mean that we say, oh, just don't be angry. But it does mean that you, at every single moment, everything that's happening to you in your life, you get to decide if you're going to approach it from a warrior mentality, or as a learning experience, or again, going into the, tragic mindset, which is life is awful. These things are happening to me. People are doing this. And what I teach people is that if you go into any tragedy with that mindset, you're actually contributing to the tragedy. For example, even standing up for certain things, right? The injustices of the world. If we want to help the injustices of the world, the way we help is by making contributions to help the people that have those injustices versus going into protesting more and more about what's wrong with it. How about we march for what we do want? How about we focus on, hey, let's raise funds, let's start a charity, let's start to contribute to the solution, So there is a very big difference. And I think the thought processes really affect absolutely everything that you do, including medicine, including physical health. And at the same time, even though my work is focused on mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of healing on the physical body, I am 100% about healing the physical body and using all of the science at our disposal, because we are at the best time in life. I think we have better science, better technology, so much research. And I think that one of the things I always say is that, in ancient times, right, we had a village doctor, the witch doctor. Everyone would go to the plant medicine man or woman or the shaman of the village, and they would go there for their healing. And they believed that these people were miraculous people, that they could do miracles in their physical healing. And guess what? That's what they called the healing back then. They just called them miracles because we really didn't have the science to back it up. We just knew, hey, if I go see this person, they're going to tell me to go, boil some plants and drink this tea for 3 days, and I'm going to be healed. But they just said, oh, this is a miracle. But really, it was science all along. At the same time, I consider all of the science and the medicine and the technology miracles of our time. Right. And so when I work with doctors and their practices, I feel that, well, they call me the doctor whisperer, because I remind the doctors that they really are these miraculous healers, but they just have like so many tools to create the healing for their patients now. And really, we are all miraculous healers, even in our own lives, just how we treat people every day. Right. You can come across a person that is just lost somebody they absolutely loved, and they feel like it's the end of their own life. You don't know that. But if you're just kind to that person on that day, you can totally restore their hope. Like, oh, wait a minute, there's still wonderful people in the world, even though this tragic thing just happened in my life. I lost this person, but look, there's still wonderful humanity among us. And so we have the power every single day to completely create miracles in people's lives, to save people's lives, just with a smile, just with a kind word, just with giving them a pass, Like if someone's honking at you like crazy on the freeway or on the street, just let them pass you. You don't know where they're rushing to. They might be rushing to the hospital to see somebody they love, and if we react, then we're kind of creating more of that anxious anger energy in the world versus just saying, you know what, I'm not in a hurry, you are. Go ahead. You go first.
It's so true. It's amazing. First things first, going back to sort of the healing mindset, you just, tapped into, hey, if I believe, that's why I guess placebo and random control trials has an effect. I believe that this is going to actually work, as the mindset is so powerful. And then I think also that notion that you just touched on is so powerful. Like, we just don't know what anyone is dealing with. And people put up a veneer or a facade every single day that they could be suffering in silence, and that ability to be kind to them.
Absolutely. Even, and especially from our practitioners, right? Whether you are a doctor, acupuncturist, or a physical therapist, when people come to a practitioner of any kind, they literally are coming for a miracle. They are not coming for the doctor or the practitioner to say, hey, this is going to take a lot of time. I don't know if your chances are. They're actually not coming for a hard truth. They're coming for hope. They're coming to a practitioner that is very confident. That's why you see some doctors have an immense waiting list. And those doctors usually have tremendous self-confidence. And some people even call them, egotistical, or like, they just have a God complex. Well, I say, what's wrong with that? If they have the science and they have had success helping people heal and they have this confidence, this is only going to make the patient's experience and outcome much better. And so the practices that I work with and the practitioners that I work with, we call this accelerating healing. right? And so some people get offended when you say, "Oh, no, no, no. What do you mean accelerate? No, everything takes time. You have to be patient." Well, yes, you should be patient and things do take time. But if you have any tool at all that you can use, just like we do in many of our circles with peptides, for example, to accelerate the healing process, let's use those. And actually, the modalities and the protocols work much better when both sides have faith, have confidence, have a belief that this protocol is going to work. This peptide is going to work. This red light therapy is going to work. When the patients come in with that belief and the doctors or practitioners come in with that belief, everything accelerates. The healing accelerates. And it even matters, for example, doctors that have larger practices and they have a staff, for example. We work with the staff many times. Why? Because every single person involved in a person's healing, the family members, the doctors, the staff, everyone has a little bit of input on that person's healing. And so the more of us realize that the thought processes, positivity, hope, faith are part of that healing process, the easier it becomes for everyone to heal. It's almost like a light turns on in your brain. When you have faith, when you believe something's going to work, you suddenly get sort of like an intuition. You know what? Let me look at this research paper. Let me look at that research. And suddenly you start finding more and more information that can help you personally heal and that can help you better serve those that you're blessed to serve. And it even matters, for example, even if you're an accountant or an attorney, for example, if the accountant or attorney has complete faith that they can help you, they usually do, right? Versus if they have any doubt about how they can help you. So confidence, I think, is extraordinarily important in everything we do, as well as a very strong will, right? We've left will behind because we kind of have a society today that says, just show up and be you. No, you show up and be you, but you do have to make efforts to have a strong will, to decide, I'm going to show up and be me, but I'm going to be professional. I'm going to do the research and I'm going to train my mind optimally to peak performance. That's part of what peak performance is, right? It's not just the physical, tangible body. It's not just working out and putting the right inputs, such as fuel, food, whatever you listen to, whatever you look at, whatever you consume, these are all the inputs, but it's also what are you thinking?
I mean, so incredibly true. Just like the notion of, and it's so actually interesting for me today to hear you. Obviously, I've heard you many times before, but the interesting thing today is it's hitting me in a special way. The reality is the mindset is so powerful. I remember, walking on fire and not getting burned,
Yes,
right? And you tell people that story and they go, "What? That's crazy. I don't believe that's true." It is 100% true. It did actually happen.
100%.
And I've done a lot of things that, most people think you couldn't do it. You couldn't pull it off, but you're able to do it if you have that right mindset. And so much of that is like getting into the flow state.
Yes.
Interesting that you're also talking about within those practices, every single person that you talk to, you touch in that process is having such an impact. It's why, like, somebody that is a negative at the front desk, you're first interacting with them in a medical practice, or any kind of, I guess, any interaction can have such an impact on what's going to happen thereafter. Like the doctor doesn't even have a fighting chance if it was bad at the very onset.
Absolutely. Yes.
I'm curious, how do you find your path to peak performance personally? What are the things that you're doing and where does it come from? Let's go to the origin story. Where does it all come from?
Absolutely. So I came from an immigrant family and I grew up eating Pop-Tarts and, Fruit Loops and the food we know now that is pretty toxic. And so, but even coming from that family where we just had the typical, basically American diet, my grandmother still somehow knew about some biohacks, right? She would make these shakes with a bunch of egg yolks, like to get our brain strong. And I don't know where she learned that, but somehow she knew about that. So, given that I did grow up on that terrible diet, I didn't have the best deck of cards to begin with. Like, my lab work was not great from a very young age. I had insulin resistance. I was also very much involved in spirituality from a very young age. I feel very blessed that I was exposed to so many religions and spiritual practices and healing modalities that it really gave me an open mind about miracles, about spirituality, and about where that all comes in. Because there are countries, for example, that don't have the resources and the science. So they do rely a lot on, the home remedies, for example, and also prayer and meditation and, praying for healing, for example. And people have miracles with that as well. So in my particular case, I was exposed to a lot and I was a healer from a very young age. And I was doing spiritual practice and being a spiritual consultant to people from a very young age. But what happens with people that are natural healers, including doctors, is that they tend to be empaths. So they're very empathetic. They really care about people. And if they are not physically optimized, their ability to be their best for those they serve is very diminished. And that includes physically, right? So they need to optimize. We need to optimize our physical body, our brain chemistry. Because what happens when you're very empathetic is you can take on the suffering of the world. In fact, there's a Buddhist meditation that does precisely that their job is to sit there and meditate and take the suffering of the world. Right now, that can work somewhere in Tibet when you are just a monk and you're doing it consciously, right? And you can connect and disconnect. But for most of us, we're hit with all kinds of tragedies every day. We hear terrible things that are happening in the world. And if we're there to serve, sometimes we can take on the sadness and take on the suffering. And most newer doctors, practitioners, whether you're a spiritual healer or a triple PhD scientific doctor, in the beginning, many do this. They take on the suffering of their clients and their patients because they just don't know how to disconnect. And that's what happened for me. I did not know how to disconnect. And so I was just serving as a healer, as a guide, as a consultant. But then I was feeling all of that anxiety and sadness and depression. And it didn't help that I ate sugar, a lot of toxic foods, because I didn't know the best diet for me. So I was eating, I think I was probably addicted to sugar at one point. And that is very common among healers. They kind of don't know how to cope with all that they're doing for others. So they kind of, you eat the sweetness because there's so much bitterness that you're seeing in others. It's a very psychological thing.
Wow.
Yes, it's very interesting. Like a lot of sugar addiction is because there's a lot of sadness or anger or bitterness that you're either experiencing yourself or in others. And so what happened for me is that in 2015, I had watched TV and I was eating my nightly sugar stash before bed. I got up and I hit the ground and I started to have a little seizure. And thankfully, my husband was there. And so he came in and he got me and, kind of snapped me out of it. The next day I go to the neurologist and I'm like, oh my gosh, did I have a stroke? What happened? So I did all of the tests. And the reason why I was so concerned is because both my grandmothers had strokes. And they said, there's nothing wrong with your brain. You just ate too much sugar. That's it. Your body just had a reaction because that was too much sugar. And and I was never fat, right? So because I was a runner. So I could eat the sugar and my metabolism wouldn't burn the sugar. But I was what was called skinny fat. I later learned because I was a runner and I did yoga. And so then I said, you know what? It's time for me to really dial in my diet. And so I actually weaned myself off of sugar very slowly. It took me about a year to do that. And I started with like, replacing it with like honey or stevia, things like that. And I remember the last few things that I had that were sweet were like protein bars that were with natural sugars, right? And eventually I didn't have any sugar, including like fruits or starches for several years. I was really learning more about like a ketogenic diet. And I have to say that my inflammation markers went way down, that my mood became extremely stable. My confidence became stronger, and I no longer was taking on the suffering of the people that I was serving. Why? Because then my brain chemistry was balanced, because sugar really affects your brain chemistry. You see a lot of people that have depression, and a lot of them eat a lot of sugar. And this is because the brain chemistry is like all over the place with the sugar. So that's where the physical optimization and desire for the peak performance started for me on the physical realm. From the spiritual realm, I always knew about that. I always knew the power of the mind. I started reading metaphysical books when I was 10 years old, and I learned about, the physical, mental, emotional connection, right? That your thoughts really do create things. They really do create circumstances. And it's actually not as woo as it sounds. People think it's very mystical. And I say, miracles and spirituality are not that mystical. They're actually very scientific, because the thoughts that we have do create chemical reactions that create the emotions. And those emotions are the ones that we act on, right? So we think something, it makes us feel an emotion, then we take the action on that emotion. But I always go back to the inputs, which are the thought processes. And actually, they talk a lot about that in cellular medicine, as you know, since you've worked with some of the biggest experts in the world in cellular medicine. They always talk about the inputs to the cells, right? And some of the ways we input into the cells are the thoughts that we have, because again, based on those thoughts, we're going to take the actions. And so I decided that I wanted to be optimal physically. And so I've done a lot of what people call biohacking, but all it really is optimizing your body to the highest, right? So I test myself like every 3 months. I'm always on track with my labs. I repaired my insulin resistance. I've never had to take depression medication, because I've been able to optimize my brain chemistry really with my diet and with physical exercise. But the most important part of this is that it is the most generous, kind thing that you can do to take care of yourself, to become a peak performer, to make sure that your body is optimized so that you provide peak performance not only to yourself, to your family, to your friends, to your community, but to everyone that you serve. I think it's extremely important to take really good care of our physical body.
Yeah, that is so true.
Absolutely. Inputs are everything. I always say, what do you have control over, right? You don't have control over everything. You don't have control really over the environment and the toxins that we're taking in, right? You can only do so much with that. You can have an air purifier, purify your water, but there's not like a whole lot you can do other than try your best to have a clean environment. But you can control the inputs into everything that you look at and focus on, into everything you allow yourself to listen to, into everything that comes into your mouth, into everything. I always say it comes in through your ears, through your eyes, and through your mouth, and through the top of your head. So the thoughts, right? We do have control over the thoughts. And what are the thoughts affected by? The thoughts are affected by everything you allow yourself to spend time looking at, right? So there are people that love to watch the news, and there are the people on the freeway, you've seen them, there's an accident, and they slow down because they want to see all the details of what tragedy happens there, instead of just saying a silent prayer for whoever was involved, or a silent blessing, or just wishing them well and healing and moving on. So if we're looking at negative things that are happening in the world, we are taking in some of those thoughts, right? The more that we look at what's wrong in the world, the more we're taking in the negative thoughts. And those thoughts do affect ourselves. And that doesn't mean that we completely are oblivious to what's happening in the world. We can, check in. For example, for me, I don't watch the news. I just don't watch the news. I know that there are people in my life that watch the news. And if there's something that I really need to know, they're going to let me know. And because I want to focus on generating as much positivity as I possibly can. And again, it doesn't mean I'm oblivious to what's happening in the world. I'm aware, but I'm not focusing on the negativity. And each of us only has a certain amount of bandwidth, right? And so it's really a decision as to, I have this much bandwidth, I have this many hours in the day. What do I want my inputs to be? Whatever I choose as my inputs are going to affect the cells in my body. They're going to affect the thoughts that I'm having. They're going to affect my view on life. So if I'm constantly looking at and listening to the tragedies of the world, then I am starting to view the world in this way, as a tragic world. Versus if I see those things as things that are happening, but know that there's always hope, that people's lives are saved every day. Drug addicts stop being drug addicts every day. Children who were abused get their healing every day. This does happen. We have wonderful therapists that are helping people. There are miracles, again, miracles happening every single day. And so the inputs need to be inputs of hope and positivity, regardless of what's going on. Some of my clients that have had cancer, again, they come and they say, I have this situation, and they're devastated. Of course they're devastated. But we decide in that moment and get the family on board and the doctors and the whole team that we say, no. This is something that happens. We know that changes have to be made. We're going to use all the protocols. You are going to get through this. And there's just nothing to lose when you decide that you will heal, when you decide that you will win. You have nothing to lose. And so for people that don't believe in manifesting or the power of your thoughts or the power of your mindset, I tell them, what do you have to lose? If you're thinking the negative thoughts, you're definitely not feeling happy when you're thinking those thoughts. So might as well pivot those thoughts to positive thoughts. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen anyway. But how you feel during that process is going to be completely different if you pivot and you decide, you know what, I am going to find the solution and the positivity here, and I'm going to fix this. I mean, we are resilient humans. Humans are extremely resilient. People can lift themselves up from the worst tragedies ever. They do it every single day. And the only difference is that they decide they're going to have a very strong will and that they are going to elevate. They are going to move forward. And they don't let anything stand in their way of their healing, of providing for their families, of doing good works in the world. And I call that the blessing work, right? Any good works that you do for yourself or for your community or for any other human being is a blessing. You are a person doing miracles and blessing work.
Decisions. It's so interesting. What do you think it is that makes people decide? I mean, is it that they had the right influences, somebody guiding them in those moments? Or is it just like some people seem to have a incredibly strong constitution and they I just decide to be this way and they are that way. Then there are the people that really gravitate towards the negativity. I I can say for myself, I've definitely felt at times like, the pull towards the negative side of things. And it's like, ooh, that never works out well for me.
Absolutely. Look, I think that people come from all walks of life, and you can find someone with an extremely unsupportive, tragic childhood and life that still thrives and still finds that drive somehow for themselves. And then you have other people that really do have beautiful childhoods with full support. They were an all-star, they had great grades, nice, intact family, and they don't do well, or they do well. But I think we're living in a really amazing time. I think in the past, it was a little bit harder, but we have so much information now that if people just scratch the surface or dig a little bit or search a little bit, they do find the guides. They do find the information, especially with social media, for example. Many people say social media is the worst thing that's happened. It's separating society. I say no. Social media is a big blessing. And this is why I really encourage the doctors that I work with, especially the ones that are super scientific, to put content out in social media. Why? Because not everyone can afford to go to these private concierge doctors. But if they're putting information out, the average person that can't go to them can take a little bit of that information to their doctor and say, hey, I heard this could help or that could help. But going back to the decisions, it's just being exposed. Just one moment of being exposed to something different, to something better, can really help a person change their decision making. And then, quite honestly, it's discipline. It is discipline. Managing our thought processes is definitely discipline. And I am all for using medication if you need medication. For example, for people that are very depressed or anxious. Absolutely. And you need to use it for as long as you need to, because that might help the person just get over the hump to actually have enough will to say, oh, wait a minute, I do want to change my thought processes. So I think some people are very blessed and they just naturally have this drive and they are just going to win no matter what happens. And other people need lots of tools. And this is why this is the best time to be alive, because we do have all of the options. And if we do make the effort and we do discipline ourselves with our thought processes, we can change our entire life, and we can change one person at a time, millions of people. It's just having that awareness. And this is, to me, one of the most important things you can have as a human being to continue to grow, to continue to achieve peak performance, is radical self-acceptance. Because life happens, and sometimes we falter, and sometimes we did, have the negative thought or get down on ourselves or react in a way that maybe we wish we would not have. So radical self-acceptance is treating yourself like you would your most precious child. For example, if a child, spills water and they're a toddler, you're not going to tell them off. You're going to clean up the water and say, hey, you have to be a little more careful. You're teaching them, right? You're teaching them the tools. Or if a baby cries, right? When a baby cries, what do you do with the baby? You pick up the baby, or you give them the bottle, or you burp them. You do the things that the baby needs. You don't tell the baby off. You don't say, hey, baby, don't cry. No, the baby is crying because something's off. So you need to give the baby what it means. And I tell my clients to treat themselves as their own precious baby. If you don't do this for yourself as an adult, who is going to do this for you? Everybody's trying to heal. Everybody's trying to elevate. Everyone's trying to feed their children, to pay their bills, to do their life, to reach their goals. So we have to have that radical self-acceptance by treating ourselves like our own precious child and forgiving ourselves, right? So when negativity comes in, like one of the tools I like to give is to just use the words cancel, cancel, And it becomes a practice, and it's a little discipline. You're like, each time, it's just like a horse, right? When you're learning to ride a horse, you start teaching them. So you got to do the same for your thoughts. When the negative thought comes in, you say, cancel, cancel. The horse, you say, oh, you want them to stop. Well, you do the same thing with your thoughts. When you know that there's a possibility that your thoughts are really affecting everything in your body, in your feelings, and in your life, you start to watch the thoughts. So when the negative thoughts come in, it's a discipline. Cancel, cancel. And you replace that thought with a positive thought. And if you can't, even movements, right? Because when we move our bodies, that kind of solidifies the positive thought. That's why it's wonderful to exercise and listen to positive things versus exercise and listen to the news, for example. So many people have like their playlist when they're working out, because they're not just strengthening their body, they're strengthening their mind. They're like listening to the music or the words or the podcasts that really start to elevate their own thought processes and their grit in life, right?
Let's talk about this cancel, cancel. This is a really interesting concept. So you're saying, okay, the negative thought comes and you say, cancel, cancel. And then you replace it with a positive thought. What would be is that the opposite of what the other thought was?
Yes. For example, let's just say you have a week and you didn't go to the gym like you said you were. Well, many people will say, oh, there I am again, not going to the gym. I just, lost all my gains. Instead of saying that, saying, saying cancel. So, you know what? I'm going to do better next week. I didn't go this week, but you know what? I normally go and I will get back to the gym. Again, it's being kind of delusional about positivity, right? You have to be your own delusional cheerleader in life. It's just like if you were, again, the parent to that baby or even a child. Let's say you were a parent that was what some consider the worst parent because you're spoiling your kids. You're just telling your kids all day long that they're amazing. And you're just so good to them. And if they make mistakes, you're like, don't worry, honey, you're going to do better. You've got this. So we need to do that for ourselves. So when the negative thoughts come in, you say cancel, and instead you talk to yourself as you would as if you were spoiling your child. No, sweetheart, you're going to do better. You've gone to the gym, you're going to go back. Or you lashed out at someone. You say cancel. Look, you would say to yourself, you normally don't talk to people like that. You're a good person and you're always trying to be good and do good and be kind to people and you lashed out. So next time I want you to take a pause. And so you don't have a therapist 24 hours a day. You don't have a spiritual or religious guide 24 hours a day. None of us have a guide with us 24 hours a day to help us better perform, but we do have ourselves. And we are the only one that is with us from the first breath to the last breath. And so we have to be our own therapist, our own spiritual guide, our own guru, our own coach. Yes, we do have other coaches and gurus and guides and helpers and doctors, but we're the only ones with us 24 hours a day. And so we get 24 hours or at least 12 or 14 hours every day to talk to ourselves and to decide how we are going to react to our own words and our own actions and what the outcomes have been in our lives. As long as we're alive, we have a chance to change. We have a chance to improve. We have the blessing of one more day to make changes. It's never, ever too late.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful to think about. Oftentimes I like to think about like hitting the reset button. What's really interesting about what you're talking about is like this mindset and this notion of you're right. You're 24 hours that you're with yourself. There's stuff, and I do think there are these thoughts that are coming in. Who knows where they come from sometimes. And that ability to discipline the mind and actually be centered enough. Everybody needs a coach, but they're not going to be there all the time. So what's a routine that you could recommend to anyone, a way to start your day that sets you on that path to positivity?
Absolutely. And I will say that all the routines that I recommend and use with my clients that are pretty high performers are the same ones that I would recommend for anyone else. And they're very practical, they're very fast, and they're very easy. And I'll tell you the reason why. Most of us, if you're like me, we are very busy. We don't have time to meditate for 20 minutes every day and quiet our mind. And actually, most people have a very hard time shutting the mind off. So I actually like working with the mind. I always prefer that you dance with your thoughts, that you embrace the mind and what it's doing versus fighting it.
Good.
So meditation I think of meditation quite differently than most people. Meditation typically teaches you to sit down, shut up, and tune into your heart, right? And I just don't have any thoughts. Well, high performers or people that are really struggling have a lot going on in their mind, actually. It's both ends, right? Whether you're really struggling or you're really performing, there is a lot going on in your mind. Whether you're just trying to survive, you're thinking about how am I going to pay these bills? How am I going to feed these kids? Or, oh my gosh, I'm, very high profile person and everybody hates me. And how am I going to deal with this publicity? There's both, but it's actually really the same. So again, I say don't fight the thoughts. So here are the things that I highly recommend and most people have found very useful. One, accept that you don't have to shut your mind off. Instead, work with your thoughts. Again, going back to if there are if there's anxiety, if there's negativity, work with cancel. Work with replacing the thoughts. Work with radical self-acceptance. Don't fight your thoughts. Don't say, oh my gosh, I can't shut my mind off. Now you have another reason to think that you're not good enough because, oh my God, I'm not a good meditator. I don't know how to shut my mind off. No. And actually, most people I talk to are like, they're telling me to shut my mind off and I'm got too much stuff to think about. So one, befriend your mind, befriend your thoughts, and befriend yourself, radical self-acceptance. The way I like to start the day, and I ask people to start the day, is number one, as soon as you wake up, I don't say, take out your notebook and write down 20 things that you're grateful for. No. Be grateful for 3 things. Just 3 things. Take 3 breaths and say 3 things that you're grateful for. And it could just be, oh my gosh, I've got this bed. Even if you didn't have a good night's sleep, but I got to sleep on this bed. I'm awake. That means I'm alive. So I get to do life again, right? And my mind is here. Like, I know what I'm doing. I have self-awareness. A lot of people don't have that, right? They get to a certain point where they don't have that. We have an epidemic of that. So gratitude, 3 things to be grateful for. Then 6 more things, and there's all 3, so it's a total of 9. 3 intentions that you have for yourself. What you want for your life. And really, this is just for you. What do you want in your relationships, in your career, in your health? Your 3 intentions. And the last 3 are the most important to me. What is your intention to serve? 3 ways in which you can be of service to the world. What can I contribute to someone's life, anyone's life? Can I do something for someone else? Can I text someone and say something nice to them who's having a hard time? Can I give the homeless guy some money and not judge him? And, I just might have restored some hope for him that day. Why the intentions for serving and forgiving are the most important. It goes back to the cells in the body. If we are coming to the world every day with me, gimme, what can I get? Only my intentions of what I want for myself. Then you are coming to your day and to your world starving. You are coming from a place of lack. You are coming because if you have this many things that you desperately need and want only, then that means you don't have all of those things. And so when you're actually physically healing, the cells in your body get that signal of desperation and say, oh, hey guys, we don't have enough of anything. So I guess we're going to just keep getting depleted. Versus if you come to your day and to the world with, even if you think you have nothing to offer, but decide, I'm going to do something to help somebody today. The cells in your body say, oh, wow, we've got a lot because we're actually thinking about what we can do to help other people. We must be good. Our cells must be buoyant and full and healthy. So guess what, cells? We don't have to worry about getting all these things in life because we're already full, so we can just work on healing. So the cells start to dance and start to get to work on healing because now the thoughts and the mind told the body, we're full. We have stuff we can give. We're here to serve. And if we're serving others, then we must be full. We must have a lot. So now we come to the world and we come every day full. Because, we live in a world of precisely that, right? Of what's in it for me? When am I going to get mine? So even like, for example, I go to a lot of conferences and I speak at a lot of conferences. And most people come to the conferences with the intention of networking. Who am I going to meet? When am I going to get my next deal? Versus if you go to any meeting or a conference with, what can I bring? Can I, even in these very business-like settings, can I bring something? Can I plant a little blessing in someone else's life? Maybe I just say something really nice. Maybe I actually help the guy that's lifting the boxes set up for 2 seconds, even though I paid money to come here. What if I just do a little something to be of service everywhere I go? If I come there like this and you come to that same meeting like this and everyone else does, now we all come completely full. We're all contributing. So the growth and the networking and the blessings and the outcomes are so much better for everyone because now everyone's coming with a full tummy, right? per se, with a full mindset, with cells that are full, with energy, because you're there to serve versus take. And I think this is definitely part of peak performance. Really understanding that we all have a lot to give, that we're all really here to be a blessing in each other's lives. We're here to serve. We're here to give.
That's so amazing. That's such a phenomenal formula. 3, 6, 9. We know sort of the sacred geometry of this exists, right? That formula, if everybody were to apply that every single day, everybody that woke up in the world, and they said, these three things, these three things, these three things, wow, imagine what would happen. Pretty powerful. So much, we've covered so much in the mindset and also, I think, spirituality wise. Now let's move on to the physical portion of, how do we take care of ourselves? I'm curious, where is your diet today? What do you do with your diet currently?
Absolutely. So I went down the keto path, but long term, I don't think it's optimal for some people. I think, especially women, I think they do a little better with some carbohydrates, especially later in the day. So I personally, had the blessing that I would test every 3 months, which I still do. And as I saw my numbers change, I saw where I had some wiggle room. And eventually I incorporated some sugar, and eventually I incorporated some starches. My typical diet is very, very simple. Some people would consider it extreme, but I'll tell you the things that I definitely don't input. And again, going back to the inputs, right? As you know, a lot of people do a lot of detoxification, right? So many people like that. Detoxing all the time because we have so many toxins. However, I always say your need for detoxification will be to the degree that you intake toxins, right? So number one for me is not to intake the toxins. Now, we can't do this 100% of the time, especially you go to a restaurant, you really don't know what's in the food. But my diet is very simple. I do prioritize animal proteins. That completely shifted my muscle tone, my fitness levels. So I actually have a real breakfast. First of all, I work out. I optimize my physical body with increasing my muscle mass. And we can go into why I think muscle mass is more than just the biological, physiological effects. I think there's actually mental, emotional effects of building muscle. Tremendous.
100%.
Yes. I always prioritize, lifting weights and building muscle. And I decided at some point that muscle was going to be like a big goal for me. Because I was a runner and I did yoga for so long, I didn't have as much muscle mass as I would have liked. So I did shift that, right? I switched from running and yoga to weightlifting and lighter cardio. So I prioritize protein. So my breakfast is usually some sort of an animal protein, whether it's chicken, fish, beef, lamb. That's what I have with some sort of greens. And depending on my workout, I will have a little bit of starch. And usually it's like a little bit of sweet potato or a very green banana, like a half of a green banana. I work all day long, so I don't have time for a real lunch per se. So that's where a protein shake comes in. And that's where in that protein shake, I add all the goodies, all the greens and the reds. And I take, several different stacks throughout the day. And then my evenings are pretty much the same. They're more of an animal protein, a little bit more on a carbohydrate side, meaning, if I had 2 ounces of sweet potato in the morning, maybe I'll have 3 or 4 ounces for my dinner, because the carbohydrates do seem to calm the nervous system. And many people just do better with some carbohydrates later in the day for sleep.
Hey.
But all of my diet is based on not taking toxins in. It's based on making sure that my body doesn't have physical pain and making sure that my brain chemistry feels really good. There's a lot of, for example, fruits and vegetables that have oxalates, which they've now done studies. This can cause actual physical pain in the body. And I've noticed that, right? So even like with the sweet potato, I only do it sometimes because I have had like physical pain in the past. I was hit by a car in 2020, like as a pedestrian, and it hit me in the back. I flew in the air and landed on the ground. And it was, I always say the angels picked me up and placed me on the ground to make sure that I didn't break anything because I was very blessed. But there was physical pain for a good while and lots of physical therapy. And that's when I started to incorporate more peptides too, by the way, and really started to clean up the diet even more to optimize the diet for muscle, for reducing inflammation and pain, and reducing imbalances in the mood, right? I mean, so much of how we think and feel, and literally, mentally, emotionally, and physically, has to do with what we eat every day. So that is, my diet is very basic. I don't use a lot of spices. I use salt. That's it. Very, very simple. And of course, on the weekend, I don't really cheat. It's just not worth it to me. If maybe I go off my diet a little bit in the sense that I will have, frozen yogurt. That's like the extent of my, going off my diet. But also, you also noticing if there's a reaction. So if there's a reaction, I don't have it, right?
Probably, I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess. I bet the frozen yogurt that you have probably is sweetened with trehalose or something.
Absolutely. I walk every day after dinner. And when it's cold out or, when it starts to get dark early, then what I do is I'll just do lunges like all over my house or squats after I eat. And that's definitely a must. I mean, you just feel better, right? Your body is meant to move. And going back to now the muscle, as we were talking about, every time you build muscle, the stronger you are physically, this somehow affects your grit, your confidence, your resilience. And, I think most men are naturally strong. So it might be a little bit easier for men to feel that confidence or that grit sometimes. But for women especially, I think it's very important to build muscle because we naturally have less muscle than men. But when we build muscle, we also build kind of like an internal muscle. And the stronger your physical body is, the stronger your will is, the stronger your grit is, the stronger your determination and your resilience is. And so this is why, even though my work is on the mental, emotional, and spiritual, I never neglect the physical, because I think optimizing the physical enhances the mental, emotional, and the spiritual.
It's so true. It's funny. I have a spiritual discipline, and it's been in my life for a long time. There's no way that I can function like this last month where I, had an injury and it's kept me from the gym. So I literally have not trained in a month. And I've had to be, at one point I couldn't even sit in a chair. So it's been really difficult. That is so true. That notion of actually working out and lifting and being strong and feeling that is so empowering. Without it, I mean, I kind of go nuts. There's that period of time when you're like, okay, I know I just have to get through this for this period of time and I have to heal. So I can't do this, but I'm just can't wait to get back. As a matter of fact, I think tomorrow is going to be my first day back in the gym. And I'm so excited. I know I have to go slow and, take it easy and kind of work myself back into it, as somebody who's admittedly overtrained for years. I mean, I've always loved to just like push it way beyond. I think that's just kind of who I am as a person. I'm curious. So in your training, as you started to shift away from, you hear this all the time. People are talking about how this, the running stuff, hey, that's great. Right. And there are a lot of people who really believe in running. A lot of people really believe in cycling. A lot of people that really feel that yoga and Pilates and all those types of things are all fantastic. It seems to me like as you fit more of the weightlifting, even some body weight related exercise into it, you've come to believe that that's a more powerful version for you, or are you still sort of moving things around? Where are you in all of that?
You know, I really love weightlifting. I feel that it's really improved everything to my life. Again, because I feel stronger. So, but I am open always to changing how I work out. For example, as we have more years on this planet, and I call it having more beautiful years on this planet versus aging. I don't call it aging.
Wow, that's the first time I've ever heard that. More beautiful years on the planet.
Yes, absolutely. I don't, for example, I don't never think about numbers with age or anything like that because I feel like, okay, we're navigating this amazing life, right? And we get to do life. I know that as we do have more beautiful years on planet, how we work sometimes has to change. And there does come a point in time where you have to mitigate, is it worth me pushing myself this much this way and take a chance on an injury, which after having certain years on the planet may take a little bit longer to recover from, versus also, even though we have a strong will and a strong determination, being willing to navigate where our body is and where our body will be optimized, not pushing it where it doesn't really want to go. And in Buddhism, they call this equanimity, not too tight, not too loose. And so never holding on too tight on how I think I should work out or how I think my diet is, but never be too loose about it either. Like if I know certain things really are not the best option, for example, a lot of people are doing something called the sugar diet right now.
Yeah, it's like big.
Yeah, it's a big deal right now, right? And I'm like, okay, there I think I'll hold on tight and don't want to go to the sugar diet, right? But if there was a time where squatting more weight was really important to me, it's not now. Now it's more about what can I do to optimize my muscles, my body, my balance, my performance, my peak performance with the least amount of impact. Because the body has the years that it has on the planet. You've had it however long you've had it. And at each stage, there are better ways to exercise. There are better ways with less impact, right? I know, some people that are in their 60s that are still running marathons, but somehow they have that resilience. Their body can handle it. There are other people in their 40s that's it. Their knees gave out and they couldn't run anymore. So I will say that I do use tools, for example, to optimize my fitness levels. I feel that I get stronger, healthier, and fitter every single year. But why? Because I'm always doing the research. I'm learning from many of the doctors that we're blessed to know. And I do use amino acids. I do use peptides. I have optimized my body for peak performance. I, don't eat so much for the fun of eating or the pleasure of eating, even though your taste buds actually change and you actually end up enjoying the foods that are beneficial to you.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
It's wild how that works. It's like funny when you were talking about how it's like you don't feel a need to cheat. It's because there isn't, you don't have it doesn't even come up. I get to a certain point and you sort of like, it's a progression.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting. Just talking to you today has been so powerful. I mean, I'm so glad you're here. I've learned so much in this discussion already. And normally, I mean, there's a lot more to talk about, but already I'm like, wow, I'm just tapping into it makes me feel like, okay, there's a real reason why you're here today for me personally. And it's so powerful. When you're working with clients, you work with, we're not going to get into the whole name dropping thing, but I mean, you work with some people and you must come to every single thing with like this foundation, but a fresh perspective on how you're going to approach things with people.
Yeah. So some of the things that I think we can all benefit from is the elimination process, right? Especially if we're here to serve. I always want to remove any interference. to healing first? How do we remove interference to healing? Again, we start with the thought processes, and this goes again to any practitioner. As a practitioner, as a guide, whether you're a doctor or a coach or a consultant, you must remove certain thought processes from your consciousness if you want to fully serve the other human being in front of you. And you first do that for yourself, and then you're able to do it for others. So we talked about radical self-acceptance, but what are the things that we need to remove to get to the radical self-acceptance? And what are those toxic thoughts that create interference with healing? One of those is judgment, being judgmental. So the first thing that any practitioner needs to remove is self-judgment and judgment of others. Why? If I come to you and I have any judgment about who you are, especially when you're working with high-profile people, they come in with a reputation, and even most people nowadays, there's social media, right? So you can find out almost anything about almost anyone in 10 minutes. Now, when somebody is well-known, now they've come with people that love them, people that hate them. If you're a politician, if you're a celebrity, if you're a president or a world leader, not everybody likes you. And people say things about people, right? So as a practitioner, the number one thing we have to remove is judgment of any human being. So when a person comes for healing, the only way to keep it completely fresh, completely new, is you must come with a clean mind. You cannot have any judgment on the person that you're serving. You cannot decide whether or not you like their politics, whether or not you like what they did to so-and-so, or how they live their life, or whether or not they have a really bad diet, for example. Even with doctors, right? Doctors can't have the judgment on their patients, because if you have the judgment, what happens is the person in front of you, they don't know why, but they'll have a little bit of a reservation on being totally open with you. And when we're here to serve people, if I want to help someone, I need them to trust me, and I need them to know that I'm not here to judge them, that I'm here to see them and serve them. I'm here in servitude. We must all have this humility in our hearts to really say, I really want to serve you. I really want to help you. And what does that mean? If I really want to help you and serve you, then I have to take care of my own thought processes, and I have to make sure that I come in with a clean slate. And we work on this actually with a lot of the doctors and the practices. We teach them to, don't look up the patients, who they are, what they are. And if you already know who they are, wipe out any preconceived notion that you have about them, and understand that each person comes as a person that's coming for healing, as a person that needs help. They're just a simple human being that is trying to do the best they can. Everyone is trying to do the best they can. Their best changes from time to time. But overall, most people are trying to do something good in the world. They're trying to serve the world somehow. So that's the number one thing, is removing interference. So for ourselves, again, having the radical self-acceptance, not judging ourselves, and not judging any other human being. So what I always say to people, there's politics. Politics is the easiest thing that people decide. This is where I get to have an opinion. This is where I get to judge. We're all entitled to our opinion. Well, having an opinion or a judgment about anything means nothing. It only means that you have a judgment or opinion about that person, place, or thing. It doesn't mean that you're right. It doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that you wasted a part of your precious life, your valuable time, in the judgment of another human being, in having an opinion. If people are very married to their opinions, our opinions don't really matter. I mean, they matter to us, but they're really not mattering to someone else. And by creating judgment or being openly opinionated about something bad about another human being, we're only creating more negativity in our life and in their life. But the most important thing is, as practitioners, we must remove all judgment. And we must see every person as the person that just came for some healing, came for some help. And I always tell people, actually, don't look at the person, look at the problem. You're there to help them solve the problem.
Wow, that's powerful. Don't look at the person, look at the problem. Yeah, it was interesting. Today, I was just in my feed. I saw a doctor that I communicate with, and I'm not going to mention who it is, but really angry. Like, just really, like, the whole approach is just like this sort of like aggressive, angry approach. And I feel like that's not really who that person is. They're just frustrated that they can't get their point across. Maybe there's a better way to do that. I found in my life, in communicating with people, whenever I get angry, I lose. Whenever I get frustrated with people and I'm unable to just calmly say to them, hey, this doesn't work for me for the following reasons, or, we're running into a situation where this is no longer really like serving the two of us together, I lose. And the better path is just to say, hey, I think this is an area that we need to work on. Are you willing to hear me? Are you willing to work with me in order to do that? And that's when I win. They win. Everybody wins.
That's powerful.
Yeah. So going back to, we've got mindset, spirituality, routine, mental discipline, physical discipline. Let's talk about social life, because I think that's an area where we have to be very careful. I know in my life, I've really started to narrow things down to who I will spend my time with. I need to be around people who are really heading in the direction that I want to go. How do you see that?
I think you're absolutely right. Number one. And so again, if you surround yourself with people that are living a completely different lifestyle than you, sometimes that will lead you to live their lifestyle. I think when we were children, they would say, like, if you hang out with the bad kids, you become like the bad kids, whatever the bad kids were, right? But if you hang out with the kids that are, doing sports and studying, then you start to do sports and study. And so as adults, I think we have become a bit of an isolated society, but because we have such a wonderful technological network and we have social media, it's also become much easier to connect with like-minded people. And for example, most of the conferences that I go to are health related, wellness related. And through those conferences, of course, I get the wonderful blessing of meeting more like-minded people. And for example, if we go to dinner with some of our health conscious friends, it's a whole different dinner than if I went out with people that typically go to bars. It's a whole different dinner and we're done by a certain time. And no judgment on people that are going to the bars, whatever. If it's working, great. But yes, absolutely. The social circles do matter. And this is where, learning healthy boundaries comes in to life. But some of us have these social circles in our families, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're very health conscious, but maybe you have a family that does drink a lot. And that's just part of the culture. Part of what you guys do is barbecue and have beer, right? Versus walking together after dinner. I think that we all have to find a way to have healthy boundaries, but in a very gentle way. So even as we find our perfect social circles that suit us, and this is a two-part thing. We live in an isolated society. We need our social circles and we need our boundaries, but we need to incorporate the boundaries in gentle ways. So I always say boundaries does not mean that you suddenly decide, oh, I don't drink, I only eat organic food, so I'm cutting everyone off that doesn't eat like me or that drinks. Well, what if you've had these relationships your entire life and now you're just cutting yourself off from all of your friends and all of your family? That's very harsh. And our nervous system does not like harshness. Anything that you do that's harsh is actually a stressor to your body. So we have to be strategic in how we incorporate our new habits and our new social circles and our boundaries. And instead, I recommend that people do things little by little. right? A little bit at a time, so that you're also never harming anyone else, right? Because if people are not on your same wavelength and they don't understand what you're doing, to them it just feels like rejection.
Mm.
So if people are not on your wavelength and they're not incorporating the same lifestyle and they've known you your whole life and they love you, to just cut them off is very painful as well. There was a time where people would talk about don't enable anyone, have very strong boundaries. And as I've seen many families and relationships dissolve, I've come to the conclusion that you have to do the most gentle thing, the kindest thing. Because there's never a reason that when I choose to change my lifestyle that I have to hurt someone else or cut them off or make them feel abandoned or neglected. If we are at our peak performance, then we should be strategic enough to do everything we want to do in a kind way without hurting anyone else. Why would you have to just totally cut your parents off or your brothers off or your sisters or your friends from childhood? If they're literally hurting you, that's a different thing. But when we are just trying to have peak performance and optimize our life and our bodies, I think we can do these things in gentle ways. Maybe you don't go to every single family gathering anymore, but you still go to some. You still participate and you still show up for the people that have been there and been a part of your life. And this is where, again, the thought processes and the discipline and the grit and the strong will has to come in. We have to challenge ourselves. No, I need to elevate my thought processes. I need to have strong grit and strong will so that I don't have to hurt other people to live my optimized life, to live at peak performance, so that I can live at peak performance, but still be kind with people that really don't understand what I'm doing.
It's amazing. You know what? I'll give you just a little story. We've all done Myers-Briggs and DISC and whatever, right? There was Sally Hogshead came out with a Fascinate You, great book and an incredible system. In that system, my personality type was avant-garde. One of the downsides of the avant-garde is that once somebody does something, pushes it too far with me, they become, quote unquote, in her system, dead to you, right? There's like no kind of coming back. It's sort of like it just turned that off. I found that actually it was true and actually doesn't serve me very well. So even in this moment, I'm realizing that you have to have a willingness to change. And listening to you here, it's interesting to hear just cutting people off, which is something that I think I've done in my life. I get to a certain point in time. I also, when I feel like people don't get it or don't see, and I feel like they should get it and they should see, but that's also unrealistic. It's unfair to them. And so I think it's a willingness to actually accept some of the things like, hey, I'm going to need to change. I'm going to need to change the way that I actually look at things. And I love what you said about trying to be kind. I think if you're coming from that place, if you're always trying to be kind to people, even when you're really upset with them, you don't ever come away from that you can't come away with any bad feelings about yourself. You can only feel bad that the situation didn't turn out in the optimal way. It's fascinating.
I really appreciate that you shared that because I think all of us, as we start to improve and we have that drive for peak performance and really elevating our lives on all levels, and we start to learn about boundaries and learn okay, these are toxic environments for me. Sometimes most of us go to the extreme in the beginning, right? We go to the extreme. We do cut the people off. We do it kind of sloppy,
Mm.
And then because maybe some people, especially that had poor boundaries that were being taken advantage of, and they just get to a point where they've had it. And so they do go extreme. But the master of peak performance and the master of elevated living finds that equanimity eventually, not too tight, not too loose, right? So maybe at first you're harsh, but as you become a master, which we can all become masters, you learned, okay, where do I tighten up? Where do I loosen up? Where should I have some wiggle room? And also for the people that we care about and we love, just because we're optimizing doesn't mean they're going to optimize as well. And it doesn't mean that that's their path. And so we can completely disagree how others live their lifestyle, but this is what real love means, that you fully take the other human with all of their flaws. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to make them feel better by participating in their type of lifestyle, but it means that you can see them as a whole. They have their own challenges. They're living the life that they're living, and they're doing the best they can for themselves. And I do believe that if you have the grit, if you have the discipline to elevate your life, to get yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually at peak performance, you are also blessed. You are also very lucky. Because, I never take all of the credit. And I ask everyone, don't take all the credit for everything you do. A lot of people work really hard and never get to these places that many of these people that are optimized get to. Sometimes there is that, right? There is a path. There is, this is where I believe that there is something divine, something sacred, something guiding us, something that has a say in our lives, and that we all have a path, and some of us are here to affect other people's lives and get that blessing. And sometimes there's people that are on our path just so we could bless them. There's not always something in it for us. Every single relationship does not have to be beneficial to me. We all have different relationships, social circles. Sometimes you are brought to a social circle just to be the one there that's not drinking and eating healthy. Because guess what? Maybe some kid in that group or someone just saw you, and that stays with them for the rest of their life. And maybe they've only seen people that drink and eat, toxic food. But you showed up at that social circle because that's your family or your old group of friends. And they saw you. And now you planted a seed that you might not know of, that they say, hey, you know what, Jock, I never saw him pick up a drink. And he was pretty conscious about what he was eating, and he was really kind to everyone. Somebody there just saw that example, and you might have just been there just to be a blessing to one person, and you may never know about it. But we never know why we are where we are. Sometimes we know, but we know.
Really interesting, because we're sort of talking about flow state as that feeling when you're in, everything is just flowing. It's just like it's going, and it feels like everything is just working. Have you ever felt drawn to like there's a certain event or something that you feel like, oh no, I have to go and do this thing? It's like it's not like you're hearing voices or anything, but it's like a feeling, I need to do this thing, and then something comes from it. Have you ever had that experience? I imagine that you have.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think my entire life has been that. I've always gone where I'm called. And I have always trusted that wherever I'm called, there's a reason for that. And again, it's either going to be something that's going to be a blessing in my life or in someone else's life. And I think it's very important. We all have intuition. It's just that some of us listen to it. So how do we know what to listen to? Well, it's whatever your desires are in your heart, right? So if you hear about an event and you're like, oh, that should be interesting, go. I think the people that really achieve elevated states of consciousness, peak performance, success in life is because they don't hesitate. They have an inclination, they have an intuition, something calls them, and boom, they just go. They go. And every time you listen and you go, something good comes of this. Something that was supposed to happen happens. versus when we hesitate, right? It's even the healing of the body goes back to this. The body needs to trust you to heal. Your body needs to, the cells in your body need to say, you know what? Jock's really good to us. He takes care of us. Well, how would we do this? It's that if you have that inclination, I should call this doctor or see that doctor or see this therapist, that you pick up the phone and you do it. And so you're feeling pain, you go and you take care of it. Then your body trusts you. Your body says, oh, this human is taking good care of me, so I can heal. I don't have to worry. Every time we take action, we're telling our physical body, we're telling our consciousness, we're telling our spirit, I got you. I'm taking action. We're on this ride together. Me, your human, is doing the work. And so I think that's a beautiful thing, to follow your intuition, follow the desires of your heart. I think all of the healing, all of the elevation, all of the peak performance is there when you follow what your heart feels, any inclination, something that catches your attention.
Amazing just to be, in your presence. Every time I've been around you, there's always like this calming sort of effect that you have. And I remember the first time I met you, it was just like, oh, such a pleasant person, right? And then it was the same way the next time. Today, I will say it's like really phenomenal to spend this time with you. And I would love it if you would come back and we could check in again in the future, sort of like catch up, like, where are you? Where have you been? What are the things that you've worked on? What are the things that you've learned? You're doing amazing things in the world and helping people, and you've been doing it for a long time. But I get this feeling that you're about to do something that's just really big, really big. Not sure exactly what it is, but I get that sense. And that's powerful. That's really cool. So before we go, anything else you want to share with the world that you feel is important to put out there?
Absolutely. I think, as human beings, we're all on this journey. We've all had struggles. We've, as you said, failed forward. We're all just trying to do our piece, right? Some are trying to survive. Some are trying to change the world. We're all at different levels as to what we're doing. And a lot of that does have to do with circumstances. So what I love to leave people with is to just have radical self-acceptance, but also acceptance and compassion for other human beings. And to really understand that in order to elevate your life, especially if you're very ambitious, especially if you want to have peak performance and success at every level, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, it's not about me. It is about serving. And it is about having compassion for people, no matter where they are or how they live their lives. Stay in your lane, clean your side of the street, do your work, plant your seeds, and don't stop. And always help someone else on the way.
Beautiful. Thank you for coming in and spending time with us today, Lea. It was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Jock. I'm really happy and grateful to be here.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, thanks everyone for watching the show. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out here at the channel, and share the video with someone who might be interested in supporting the charity that our guest mentioned in the episode. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.